A low-level tenant who had traveled to the realm of cultivating immortals suddenly appeared in the city of Bianliang during the Northern Song Dynasty. He soon realized that he was the only cultivator in this world. This is only I am alone, manifestation of sage in front of men, behind-the-scenes mastermind, plundering resources, the story of eternal life and leisure, and becoming immortal with the Dharma, keywords of the novel. Starting from the Northern Song Dynasty, becoming immortal without pop-ups, starting from the Northern Song Dynasty, becoming immortal TXT complete collection download, starting from the Northern Song Dynasty, becoming immortal latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Farming for 2.5 years. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Farming for 2.5 years Donghuang, Ningzhou Prefecture. The city of Hongguanfang is located in the depths of the vast and winding mountains, winding for 10,000 miles. Dozens of immortal cultivation families jointly supported the normal operation of this neighborhood, and the endless number of founding ancestors intimidated the whole world, making the little ones bow down and dare not make mistakes. For thousands of years, many Taoist friends have praised and recognized the signboard of Hongguanfang City, knowing that the most important rules here are not to kill or steal goods without reason, and the safety of both parties in the transaction is guaranteed. Trust is established, and business naturally becomes more prosperous. Gradually, more scattered cultivators and mortals settled in like ants, developing into a behemoth covering hundreds of spiritual mountains. On the outskirts of Fengshe, away from Hufeng. This is the residence of the Li family, equipped with a large formation to protect the law, and outsiders are not allowed to enter without authorization. On the mountainside, there is an ordinary cave. Zhang Yuqing sat cross-legged on the spiritual bed, with a golden light spot shining and fading in the center of her eyebrows. Half a quarter of an hour later, he slowly opened his eyes, and a faint light in them flashed away. Failed. Feeling the lack of growth in cultivation, a bitter expression appeared on Zhang Yuqing's face. After 2.5 years of cultivation, the initial progress was extremely fast. At one point, I thought I was a genius in cultivation, but later I realized that cultivation is about resources. Zhang Yuqing punched fiercely on the spiritual bed, and the hard stone cracked open several tiny cracks with a click. He reacted with a slight pain and hesitation on his face, and at a loss, he spread his fist. Living in a cave far away from the spiritual meridian, I only have a meal of spiritual rice every 3 to 5 days. I practice the Great Road Goods technique and even spend most of my time cooking and planting spiritual rice in the spiritual field every day. Busy all year, I can only keep 30% of it. Xiu Xin. Xiu Fart. Zhang Yuqing could never have imagined that she had just made a wish to cultivate immortality while giving incense to Sanqing, and had truly traveled to this world. The excitement of being a newcomer quickly dissipated, and Zhang Yuqing was soon discovered to have spiritual roots by the Li family in Hongguanfang City. They brought him from the mortal world to this true cultivation world and became a glorious spiritual cultivator. There's no way, who can make his spiritual roots the 4 spiritual roots of the rotten street in the immortal realm, commonly known as the miscellaneous spiritual roots. If it were the 3 spirit roots, there is still hope that they will be taken into the inner courtyard of the Li family and become responsible for the worship of martial arts in the future. According to the words of the ancestor of the Li family, the miscellaneous spirit root is enough to break through the middle stage of qi refining in this lifetime. Let's just do the promising job of being a spiritual cultivator honestly. The master's request for 70% of the rent from you is already generous enough. After calculation, as long as you save a spirit stone for over 100 years, you can pay off the materials owed to the Li family. Many people envy it. Thinking of the forced contract of sale that Zhang Yuqing was forced to sign, a fierce look appeared in her eyes. The fact that Li's parents always help him embark on the path of cultivation is not free. The cost of providing him with basic cultivation techniques such as Shao Yan Qi Ju, Shao Gan Lin Shu, Tu Tu Ju, and Shao Kong Mantra, is that Zhang Yuqing must make a heart demon vow to become a tenant in the Li family before repaying these important cultivation resources. Afterwards, Zhang Yuqing naturally knew that she had been deceived, but unfortunately the situation was stronger than others. In the world of cultivating immortals, the law of the fittest prevails. With the advanced cultivation of Li's parents, if he dares to say no, his life may be in danger. It is said that the scattered cultivators outside the neighborhood fight tirelessly all day long, and many people with missing arms and legs are willing to pay a high price to buy limbs with spiritual roots to amputate and renew. At that time, only playing low and playing small. After 3 years of hibernation, Zhang Yuqing became increasingly disheartened. It's really difficult for Zhailingyan to extract pure magic. Whenever he tries his best to comprehend the earth, water, fire, and wind between heaven and earth, it is like scooping water out of a bamboo basket, and even when his meditation is exhausted, he can only absorb a small amount of spiritual energy into his body. Afterwards, the 4 spiritual roots divided one part of spiritual energy into 4 small parts, refining them into pure wood, water, gold, and earth spiritual energy, which were stored in the dantian. During this process, most of the spiritual energy was consumed in vain. It is said that if it is a genius with a single spiritual root, the step of perceiving spiritual energy can be omitted, and the purest single spiritual energy can be directly introduced into the body, with a loss rate of almost 10%. Almost double spiritual roots can also achieve natural spiritual energy entry into the body, but it also needs to be refined to eliminate spiritual energy that does not belong to one's own spiritual roots. Unfortunately, for thousands of years in the cultivation world, I have never heard of any heavenly or earthly treasures that can enhance a person's spiritual root qualification. Zhang Yuqing's face showed a look of unwillingness, and he murmured softly, but there are precedents of miscellaneous spiritual roots breaking through the foundation. Compared to heavenly spiritual roots, miscellaneous spiritual roots are only slightly less efficient in purification, better than ordinary people without spiritual roots. As long as the denominator is large enough, the difference in numerators can be filled in. For example, one of the founding ancestors of Hongyiwanfang City, Qin Fengzhenren, was built with countless resources. There's no way, who would call him a fake Dan realm father. However, I may not even be able to eat a meal of lingmi in a month, and it has been difficult for me to break through the natural barrier of refining qi from the 3rd to 4th levels until today. Accumulating a whole year of mana to charge through levels is like shaking a tree with a flea, and the obscurity of obstacles has not diminished at all. In just 1 year, I practiced like a rocket to the 3rd level of qi refining, followed by more than a year of cultivation constraints. Even with Zhang Yuqing's psychological endurance as a person of 2 generations, it was almost hopeless. He never forgot the mocking gaze of the Li family steward when collecting rent, as well as the confusion and exclusion of fellow tenant cultivators. Why is the cultivation of miscellaneous spiritual roots so hard-working? Is it useful to break through to the 3rd level of gas refining in just 1 year? Not bad. It took Lao Huang 60 years to break through to the middle stage of qi refining. It can be seen that the 3rd level of qi refining for our miscellaneous spiritual roots is already the limit of manpower. The next step is to rely on hard work, and there is no need to work so hard. No, I'm different from them. Zhang Yuqing's eyes released a fierce color. I still have golden fingers. Since the level cannot be cleared, all the spiritual energy will be fully supplied to the golden finger next. In Zhang Yuqing's sea of consciousness, a slightly dim golden light suspended like clouds and mist. Over the past 2 years, he has been able to feel the presence of this golden light in every practice. And he also realized that this golden light would unconsciously absorb the magic he extracted. Zhang Yuqing has always suspected that this is the golden finger that comes with it when crossing, absorbing mana or charging it. He only has a few miscellaneous spiritual roots, and his daily refining of magic is pitiful. He also needs to be snatched away by the presence of this perhaps golden finger. How could he endure it? He only managed to supply a small amount of magic to this golden light every day to keep it from dissipating. Over the course of 2 years, Jinguang has only filled about half of its capacity. For some unknown reason, Zhang Yuqing was able to sense the charging progress of the golden light. Since Zhang Yuqing has accumulated wealth and failed to clear the level, he is determined to put all his chips on the golden light. According to the current progress, 2 more months will be enough. The next day, Zhang Yuqing finished grooming as usual, checked his personal magic tools, and walked towards the spiritual field. Along the way, one could occasionally see tenant cultivators dressed in blue clothes embroidered with the Li family logo greeting him. Yuqing Daoyu. Brother Guhun. The two greeted each other and walked silently. It is said that the rent will increase this year. Guhun has a face in his 30s, with long beards under his chin, and is gentle and elegant, like a teacher. Zhang Yuqing shook her head slightly and said, "How do you say this?" Guhun looked around and whispered, "The young son of the Li family's ancestor has reached the age of enlightenment. I heard he wants to be worshipped by someone under the Qinfeng family's ancestor. After all, since the Li family's ancestor fell 18 years ago, there has been no founding ancestor, so the foundation may be unstable." Zhang Yuqing sighed and said, "If it's true, I'm afraid we'll have another hard time together." Guhun sighed repeatedly and said, "Alas, you're okay, Yuqing Daoyu. The whole family is not hungry when you have enough to eat alone. My second son also has the ability to cultivate immortality. Although he's just a miscellaneous spiritual root, he always wants to find a way out for him. He can't be like me, just become a tenant and waste his life. Shoo, keep quiet." Zhang Yuqing gestured, "The mountain patrol team is here." The mountain patrol team is entirely composed of Li family's bloodline cultivators, responsible for patrolling and guarding the spiritual fields and the surrounding spiritual veins. In front of these children of the Li family, we cannot say anything bad about the main family. Mild cases may involve whipping, while severe cases may result in confiscation of spirit stones and rice. A few sword lights flashed away, and the oppressive atmosphere gradually returned to tranquility. At the foot of the mountain, tenants from all over the country continued to whisper to each other. Guhun looked enviously at the traces of sword energy cutting through the sky and murmured, "I really envy them. In the middle stage of qi refining, they can start practicing qi control flying. Although they are not really flying swordsmanship, they also have the ability to fly." "Alas," Zhang Yuqing whispered, "plant more spiritual rice. With some spiritual stones to assist in cultivation, sooner or later you can also break through the middle stage of qi refining." Guhun nodded and said, "Not bad. Yuqing Daoyu, let's see my little Gonlin decisive move." The blue magic emanated from his fair left hand, condensed into rain and mist, instantly enveloping a spiritual field, casting misty raindrops full of spiritual energy. "Okay. The Taoist has almost reached the realm of entering the house with this skill, and every drop of rain contains equal spiritual energy, greatly reducing losses. The Yuqing Taoist friend's little diamond mantra is also well known. After a while, I will ask for your help in deworming it." Nature is natural. A business exchange ended the day's work. Zhang Yuqing rubbed her arms and shoulders and returned to the cave to meditate and regulate her breath. It's not that he really has body soreness. Practitioners have all kinds of bones, and their bodies are strong. It's just a matter of casting spells, and there's no harm to their bodies. Just putting down 10 spells for a day makes my arms feel stiff. 20 days later, the steward of the Li family issued a notice that the rent would increase by 20% this year. This year, all tenants can only keep 10% of the lingmi for their own use, and the rest will be turned in. Many tenants were all in a state of uproar, each with a worried expression on their faces. Even Guhun, who was naturally intelligent, no longer had his usual smile and sighed all day long. On the contrary, Zhang Yuqing paid no attention and continued to rain, deworm, and plow tirelessly, day after day, as if unaware. Because in another month, the golden light will be fully charged. Quickly, a month's time passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Zhang Yuqing entrusted Gu Hun to help take care of his several acres of spiritual field in advance, and he needed to stay in seclusion for a period of time. Subsequently, he immersed his mind in the sea of consciousness, gathering on the rich golden light that almost turned into substance. Zhang Yuqing's mind moved, and the golden light seemed to be stimulated and instantly lit up. A huge suction suddenly struck. Before he could react, his consciousness sank into pitch black. In the next moment, a massive spiritual energy will come like a tidal wave. Zhang Yuqing suddenly opened his eyes, and a strong wind howled past him. In front of him was a huge city, as if countless people were staring at him, with chaotic screams echoing one after another. Is there someone in the sky? Isn't it that a fairy has descended? He's flying. Am I flying? Zhang Yuqing regained consciousness and suddenly burst into a cold sweat. His position is hanging high in the sky at this moment, falling down at an extremely fast speed. Although he is a cultivator, if he falls hard, it will definitely be the result of his death on the spot. At a critical moment, Zhang Yuqing almost wholeheartedly devoted herself to the challenge of the middle stage of qi refining, like a blessed soul. The massive spiritual energy that came from an unknown source, like arms and fingers, swam wildly along the meridians and acupoints, passing through without any sense of obscurity or hardness. His breath was so strong that it reached its peak, accompanied by a crisp bang that seemed to be non-existent. Breakthrough in the mid-term of gas refining. Sword. In mid-air, Zhang Yuqing let out a loud shout. A pocket-shaped navy blue sword emerged from its sheath and flew out of his arms, rapidly growing in size. The sword light floated to his feet, firmly catching Zhang Yuqing, who was rapidly falling. Then, under his control, it suspended in the air and remained motionless. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Seeing Immortals in the Day. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Seeing Immortals in the Day. The emotions of the crowd seem to be contagious. At first, only the residents in the southwest corner of Bianliang city inadvertently looked up and noticed the immortal walking with a sword in the sky. Quickly, the intense noise and unbelievable screams spread outwards in a wave shape. Are there really immortals? On the ground, countless pairs of excited eyes stared intently at the small figure in the sky, making an unconscious moan as saliva flowed out unconsciously. Why wouldn't he fall? A woman grabbed her foolish son and scolded him angrily. That's a fairy. How could it fall off? The book tells us that immortals can ride the wind. But this immortal stepped on a sword, and I guess it held him up. But why wouldn't the sword fall off? The young child with the horn tied was sniffing and trying to squint his eyes in an attempt to see the appearance of the fairy clearly, but could only vaguely recognize that it was indeed a humanoid silhouette stepping on a flying sword. In about 10 minutes, half of the Bianliang city caused a sensation from top to bottom. Those who stand, sit, lie down, and are still panting. Whether it's officials, vendors, pawns, idle men, children, women and children. They all know that a fairy has descended from heaven to earth. This is a great event that has never been heard of since the beginning of the world. Who in this book can achieve immortality in immortality through the wind, but who has ever seen it? Nowadays, there really stands a flying person in the capital city of Bian. Regardless of whether he is a ghost, a god, an immortal, or a demon, those who can fly are definitely not ordinary people. Without saying much, let's first devoutly pay tribute and worship one or two. What if the immortal is in a good mood and bestows immortality? Zhang Yuqing stood out of thin air, not even excited to break through to the middle stage of qi refining. He watched as all the mortals in the city who saw him instantly entered a state of rigidity. Subsequently, countless people rushed around to announce that they had brought all their relatives, friends, and neighbors outside the house, without saying a word, and began to kowtow wildly. Why are you so excited? Have you never seen a practitioner before? As soon as this idea surfaced, Zhang Yuqing immediately realized it. By the way, it seems that I used my golden finger and instantly crossed the sky. Then, a huge spiritual energy entered my body, finally breaking through the level that had been restricting me for a long time. Perhaps this is no longer the cultivation world. Zhang Yuqing tried to call out to the dim golden light in the sea, but there was no response at all. Do we have to explore on our own? He nodded and waited in the air for a full 10 minutes. According to the common sense of the cultivation world, if there were cultivators stationed in this city, they should have already known of their arrival and would receive them accordingly. However, the passage of time, apart from causing more and more people to pay attention to this immortal in the sky and create a worldview shock, no one from the same path came to talk to him with a sword. The number of tiny mortals like ants gathering on the ground has increased even more. The good eyesight of cultivators is enough to make these people appear delicate in Zhang Yuqing's eyes even at such a distant distance. Looking around, some people kneel with their hands clasped together, some have already offered tribute, some take advantage of the chaos to steal someone's baggage, and some are crying uncontrollably for something. Many wealthy families have seen the wind and speculate quickly. The tribute table and incense altar have already been arranged properly, and in a hurry, they don't know where to catch a wild Taoist who is dancing with a wooden sword and dancing with a great god, praying for a response from the immortal. It's really a mess. Zhang Yuqing sighed and confirmed that there were no cultivators present here. The spiritual energy in the air is much rarer than that from Hongguanfang city, almost reaching the level of none, indicating that there are no large spiritual veins nearby. So what is the function of my golden finger? The art of escaping thousands of miles. But where does that sudden and massive spiritual energy come from? Well, since golden finger doesn't respond, I'll find a place to settle down first before discussing anything else. Zhang Yuqing made up her mind and the sword light dragged its long trajectory towards the top of a mountain not far from the city. After practicing for several years, Zhang Yuqing was accustomed to living in the cave. Moreover, the attitude of ordinary people towards cultivators in this city was somewhat extreme. Zhang Yuqing did not want to get mixed up with them and planned to dig his own cave or take a break and leave. The top priority is to find like-minded individuals in order to better understand the current situation. Fortunately, in the middle stage of qi refining, one can use the qi control technique to control the sword. Not only can it be used for short flights, but it is also easy to control flying swords and chisels. It truly deserves the reputation of little flying sword technique. In the middle stage of qi refining, the outward release of mana can reach a distance of 20.30 zhang, far from being comparable to the length of 1 zhang in the period when the first 3 layers of mana are not fully filled. This is also why the Li family recruits and enshrines only those who can steadily break through the 3 spiritual routes to the middle stage of qi refining. It is precisely because only in the middle stage of qi refining can sword fighting techniques be practiced, and killing qi in the early stage is as fast as cutting grass. He could certainly leave, but the city of Bianliang exploded. Countless people pounded their chests and feet, feeling regretful for missing out on their immortal fate. In the imperial city, several fast horses rushed from outside the Xihua gate. If the soldiers of the Imperial City Department didn't look conspicuous wearing the official robes of the Heavenly Supervisor, they would probably be unable to resist falling off the gate and shooting arrows. Quickly open the city gate, I have something important to attend to your majesty. Yang Wide is a civil servant who is not used to riding horses, but the situation is urgent at this moment and not a time for procrastination. He had just gone down to court, but on his way home, he was surprised to hear a servant report that a strange person was hanging high in the sky. When he looked up, he saw the immortal in the blue robe standing still like a guest from outside the world. Yang Wide's rationality was instantly shattered, with a strange sound coming from his mouth. He covered his heart and his eyes were red, almost falling off the official sedan chair. Hurry up, go back to the palace. In an instant, the image of the guest star on the Sunday and the immortal being in this world intertwined a few days ago, making it difficult for Yang Wide to control himself. He just kept repeating, great good omens. Zhao Zhen, Emperor Renzong of Song, has not yet obtained the temple name of Renzong. After all, he has not died yet. However, his reputation for caring for his subordinates, loving the people, being benevolent and filial by nature, and being generous and kind to others has long been deeply imprinted in the minds of every vassal. Yang Wide has also heard rumors about the beloved emperor's recent poor health. Perhaps this immortal was born for the sake of his majesty. Having made up his mind, Yang Wide met this kind-hearted and chubby official in the Wendy Hall. Yang Qing. Zhao Zhenduan sat on the dragon chair, his face excited, and immediately shouted when he saw Yang Wide enter the main hall. I'm sorry, I have something important to ask you. Your Majesty, it's a great omen. Yang Wide gritted his teeth and suddenly looked up and shouted, I see immortals in the daytime. I wish your Majesty a long and boundless life, and enjoy the blessings of immortals. Zhao Zhen also saw the stunning figure of a fairy on the way to the academy after finishing his early morning court. At that moment, he only felt blood rushing up all over his body, and his heart was in agony. Thanks to the imperial doctors who have been taking secret medicine for him in recent days, he did not suffer from the disease on the spot. Just as he was released from the gates of hell for a moment, he disregarded the dissuasion of those around him and squeezed out a sentence from his throat. Hurry up and call the heavenly supervisor. The two of them went in both directions and finally met in just 10 minutes. At this moment, they didn't know that the sword immortal, who was involved in the hearts of millions of people, had drifted away. Okay. Zhao Zhen laughed heartily and let the imperial physician beside him, with a bitter expression on his face, hesitate to dissuade him. Excitedly, he stood up and said, I want to meet the heavenly immortal. Quickly, come up with a constitution. How can I offer sacrifices to the heavenly immortal, express my enthusiasm to the heavenly immortal? This matter still needs to be handled by the Ministry of Rites. Yang Wide instantly entered a state, and the emperor wanted to see an angel. It was such a normal thing, indicating that he was a good steward of heaven. Heaven sympathized with the emperor's worries and sent an angel to earth. However, the etiquette of meeting angels requires the Ministry of Rites to draft, and one only needs to assist from the sidelines. Report. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Unexpectedly, a maid hurriedly ran into the hall and exclaimed, Immortal, he's him, he's gone. What? The people in the palace were all amazed, even the palace maids, eunuchs, and imperial doctors who were accompanying them cast surprised glances. Yang Wide was the first to bear the brunt, with a surge of qi and blood. He didn't care about the etiquette of the emperor and his ministers. He walked out of the hall a few steps and indeed saw a clear sky. Where did the person who wielded the sword and flew immortals come from? Yang Qing, how's it going? Zhao Zhen's tone was full of anticipation. Your Majesty, do not panic. Ordinary people do not see true immortals. Immortals do not leave, but after appearing as saints in the daytime, they temporarily hide in front of others. As long as we are sincere, we can reach heaven to listen and see immortal faces. Zhao Zhen listened to Yang Wide's evasive words and didn't understand that the true immortal was missing. He waved his hand repeatedly and said, Quick, go find the immortal and find him. After speaking, he felt another angina, his eyes pitch black, and he fell into a coma. Your Majesty. The people around were suddenly startled and rushed forward, but there was also a flurry of confusion and no need to say more. On July 4, 1054, Yang Wide noticed the appearance of a strange star in the sky. A few minutes before sunrise, a strange star rose to the horizon, much brighter than Venus or any other star visible in the sky. The royal astronomer referred to it as a guest star and recorded it. He reported it to the emperor and explained that it was an auspicious omen, then continued to observe carefully. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Immortal Fate. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Immortal Fate. The Changsheng Temple is located halfway up the stream and mountain outside the city of Bianliang. In addition to the middle-aged Taoist Liang, there are 4 or 5 Taoist children in the temple who have not yet reached their weak crowns. Over the years, they have had few incense and are not well known. Although today's officials advocate the teachings of Taoism, unfortunately, the great sage state temple in Bianjing City is renowned and almost sweeps away all the nearby believers. The incense is extremely popular, and the temple is decorated with magnificent golden statues that are extravagant. High officials and high-ranking officials also come and go, and ordinary people naturally play with their lives to worship and worship. When Lu Daochang was young, his eyes were hot and he wished he could shed his robe and put on a robe, but he couldn't bear to part with a head of green silk. Nowadays, after years of wasted time, he has also become old and frail, with his green hair turning into blonde hair. However, he has long been accustomed to a life of limited resources. Just be humble, my heart is very firm. Under the Changsheng Stone Creek, Taoist Liang held his fists and held his ground, breathing in his energy, consolidating his heart towards the Tao. Suddenly, he felt the flickering sword light in the sky, and a fairy descended from the sky. With a roar, he swept through the air and headed straight towards the mountain top. At that moment, Taoist Liang's face turned purple-red and he didn't care about morning meditation. He lifted his robe and exposed his 2 dark legs, and a scream erupted from his mouth. Immortal, immortal. Immortal. Master. Several Taoist children cheered excitedly. I have seen it too. I have seen it. A fairy flying with a sword is heading up the mountain. My way is endless. Lu Liang, the Taoist priest, burst into tears as he recalled that he had been sent to a Taoist temple by his family since childhood. It had been more than 40 years since then. Could it be that he was finally moved by heaven and sent to become an immortal? Students, quickly prepare your clothes, hats, and Taoist robes to welcome the immortal. Although he couldn't determine the true purpose of becoming an immortal, Liang's accumulated experience for most of his life keenly told him that this may be the only opportunity for him to truly stand out from ordinary people and come into contact with real immortals in his lifetime. Regardless of whether it is a god or a Buddha, as long as it can help him escape from the sea of suffering, he will also recognize it as a monk. If you miss this opportunity, you may regret it for half of your life. A few people quickly put on their long robes and Taoist crowns that they would never bear to wear on weekdays, flipped out the incense at the bottom of the box and ignited it. Then, Liang took the lead in carrying the incense and walked towards the place where the sword light had disappeared from memory. The mountain road is difficult, but fortunately, the master and disciples occasionally go into the mountain to pick herbs on weekdays. If someone falls ill in a nearby household, they often come to the temple to seek medicine. Most Taoists have a basic understanding of pharmacology, and entering the mountains is also a common occurrence, so there is no need to procrastinate while walking. The terrain of Bianliang is plain, and the mountains are not very high. In just 1 or 20 minutes, you can see from a distance the top of the mountain. There is a green-clothed immortal sitting on the ground, but his body is slightly suspended, not stained with dust. What surprised Liang even more was that on the side of the immortal, an intricately patterned flying sword sharpened the stones like mud, causing dust to fly and almost visible to the naked eye, carving out the overall shape of a cave. This is a true immortal method. In an instant, all doubts were dispelled, and the 2 lines of hot tears in the corner of Liang's eyes could no longer be sustained. Suddenly, tears streamed down his face, and he began to cry from tens of feet away. Immortal! Immortal! Ha! Zhang Yuqing opened her eyes slightly and glanced at the newcomer. How dare ordinary people disturb cultivators? Zhang Yuqing was accustomed to the indiscriminate slaughter of ignorant mortals by the scattered cultivators in the eastern wilderness. She knew that ordinary mortals would love to have a few more legs to escape when encountering cultivators, and this was the first time they had seen themselves climbing up. Fortunately, he met me. If he were a demon cultivator, he would probably have to be soul-drawn and skinned after death. A few thoughts briefly circulated, and Zhang Yuqing's mind moved, taking in Liang from a distance of tens of zhang. Liu Daochang shouted twice and felt a gust of wind coming from under his feet. An inexplicable tremendous force restrained him, and then his whole body took off, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived at the foot of the upper immortal seat. "Who are you?" The voice of the immortal pierced into his ears, appearing ethereal and majestic, with an expressionless yet intimidating fairy face. Liu Liang dared not look too much, fearing that he would harm the immortal. He knelt down and bowed with all his body, and spoke respectfully and devoutly one by one. "Your Majesty, I am Liu Liang, the leader of the Changsheng temple. The Taoist name is Qing Feng, and I have been devoted to the Tao since childhood, with a pure nature." Before he could finish speaking, he felt a tremendous force blocking his throat and unable to produce any sound. Liang's cold sweat surged, and he could hear the immortal's impatient voice coming out again. "Speaking of the key point, what is this world?" As the words fell, Liang was finally able to breathe. He bent his body a bit and begged, "Please forgive me, Master. It is now the first year of the Zhihe reign of the Song Dynasty, and this place is the capital of Bianliang. The current official family is the sixth son of the Zhenzong sect, and it has been 32 years since he ascended the throne. Politics and people are harmonious." As he spoke, he repeatedly rolled his eyes to observe the expression on the face of the immortal. However, he saw that the immortal was becoming increasingly impatient and knew that he had been talking too much. He didn't care about anything else, but cried, "Immortal, I have been waiting for more than 40 years, and finally I have met the fate of the immortal. Please let me serve you around and make up for your mistake." Zhang Yuqing, however, had no intention of caring about him, and his thoughts were constantly in turmoil. Song. Is it the Song dynasty that he is familiar with? Do you know Bao Zheng? Bao Long Tu, Bao Lord. Liang stopped crying and thought in confusion. According to folk legends, Bao Lord judges the mortal world day and night. It is said that the reincarnation of the underworld is the reincarnation of the underworld and the king of hell. Is there really such a thing? Why did the immortal ask him alone? Bao Longtu has repeatedly dealt with strange cases, and his official position is innocent. The people of Bianliang city highly respect him, and I have heard a little about him. However, this person has now been transferred to a local official and is not in Beijing. Liu Liang respectfully replied. Now, Zhang Yuqing has confirmed that this is exactly the Song dynasty that he is familiar with. Knowing that this was the great Song dynasty, the golden light in the sea of consciousness finally reacted. The sixth sense in the underworld told him that he could leave this direction and return to the eastern wilderness immortal cultivation realm at any time. However, at this moment, Zhang Yuqing was no longer in a hurry. However, based on people's various performances so far, I am more inclined to believe that this is a non-magical plane, which means that I may be the only cultivator. As soon as this idea appeared, Zhang Yuqing was startled, and then a burst of ecstasy surged into her heart. If that's the case, wouldn't it be said that I am invincible in this direction and the only one who can do it? In an instant, countless ideas surged into my heart. The cultivator's consciousness is so strong that Zhang Yuqing's abnormality is not exposed at all. By now, the role of the golden finger is all too clear. He Zhang Yuqing has the ability to travel back and forth between two realms. At this moment, recalling everything he had seen and heard over the Bianjing city, Zhang Yuqing knew that many people in the city must have already known about the existence of his immortal. That's a good thing. He was originally worried about the scarcity of spiritual energy here, and somewhat despised it. Now that we know it's just a change of plane, the scarcity of spiritual energy is not a problem at all. As long as he is willing, he can return to Donghuang to continue his cultivation at any time. And this plane can be focused on creating a safe and comfortable plane that specifically provides him with cultivation resources. Oh my goodness, although Zhang Yuqing has only been practicing for 2.5 years, he has already suffered from the lack of cultivation resources. Although this plane now appears to have poor spiritual energy, perhaps he can find some extremely precious cultivation resources for him. But to achieve this step, it is necessary for him to establish a force that belongs to him here. Since he is highly likely to be the only cultivator in the world today, is there any faster way to establish influence than to make people believe he is a true immortal? You should know that even in times when miracles and immortality are not visible, ordinary people can donate their wealth to temples and Taoist temples for the sake of their illusory longevity, just seeking peace of mind. After all, Zhang Yuqing really has supernatural powers and spells in her body, and waving her hand to create something as magical as a fairy tale in the eyes of ordinary people is enough to achieve it. At that time, how many people will join his team and dedicate everything to him? Zhang Yuqing quickly cleared her thoughts and glanced at Lu Daochang, who was still kneeling on the ground. At first glance, she could see that the latter's body was slightly trembling, his heart was beating too fast, and his breathing was not smooth. After all, at the age of over 50, Lv Daochang suffered several stimuli in a short period of time, which even the strong young man couldn't bear. He is still persevering and hasn't fainted, thanks to his decades of consistent physical exercise. Someone brought a pillow when they wanted to doze off. Since he has made up his mind to create his own image as a true immortal in the world, Taoist Bianliang may come in handy. Get up. Zhang Yuqing gently raised his hand, and Lv Daochang felt like a spring breeze brushing his face. A warm and extremely hot current poured down from his head and skull, sweeping his whole body up and down in an instant. Wherever he passed, it was like soaking in a hot spring, warm and comfortable for everyone. In an instant, whether you have been suffering from old illnesses, headaches, body heat, or obstructed lungs, even his graying beard and hair have been completely refreshed. Although it hasn't turned white to black, it's no longer the pale and dry color it used to be, but rather incredibly moisturized and glossy. This is the method of the immortal family. It has been thousands of years, and no one has seen the true immortal for thousands of years. I, Bianliang, have finally been fortunate enough to be pitted by the upper immortal. Lv Daochang was about to cry, and was lifted up by an invisible pair of big hands on his knees. He bowed to Zhang Yuqing and swore devoutly, saying, "Disciple Bianliang, I swear here that I will follow the upper immortal for the rest of my life, with my liver and brain smeared to repay the immortal's kindness." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Methods of Testing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Methods of Testing. Zhang Yuqing was willing to spend some mana to comb the meridians, dispel diseases, and relieve pain for this Taoist, naturally with the intention of convincing the other person. But he had no intention of simply agreeing to his request to follow. Zhang Yuqing knows that things that are too easy to obtain are often not cherished by people. We need to set up some artificial obstacles and difficulties for Director Lv, so that he can endure hardships and achieve his wish in the face of danger. Only then did he realize that the fate of immortality was not easy to come by, and in the future, it would be difficult to summon him without daring to show off. Therefore, he just gave a faint, neither responding nor rejecting. Liang's back was sweating profusely, and when he saw that the immortal did not respond, he secretly racked his brains and pondered what chips he had that could move the immortal. "Master, Master!" Several young boys' childish voices rang out, but 4 Taoist children stumbled and rushed forward, hastily hiding behind Liang lying on the ground, calling out to him softly. "Good disciple, don't whisper and remain silent in front of the immortal." Liang turned his head and scolded softly. "Wow, Master, you're much younger and have a rosy complexion. What treasure did the immortal give you?" The 4 most favored disciples exclaimed with surprise on their faces. At the foot of the stream and mountain, a large group of people came hula. Quickly, Quickly, the Immortal is right on the mountain. I see it really well. That sword light is coming towards Shishan. Several mischievous people competed to climb the mountain. They live close together, originally from nearby villages, but now they are leading the way in front of the crowd. Dust and smoke billowed from behind, and the people who were devoted to the Tao were dragging their families, hoping that their parents would have two more legs running side by side. In the center of the official road, there are several tall horses carrying the noblemen of the powerful family, and they follow the servants around shouting and urging the people not to block the horses. If it were for normal times, everyone would be afraid of giving up their power. Now that Xianyuan is in front of them, even if you slow down, you are afraid of being taken first. Regardless of whether you are the young master of Wang Shangshu or Lu Shilang's family, you should just turn a deaf ear. The already spacious official road was crowded by these thousands of people, and even the unknown people watched it for fun. They only heard that there were immortals on the creek and mountain, so they followed along to bustle. Fortunately, the city of Bianliang has now been under martial law, with its gates locked and only a few thousand mentally active civilians running out. Otherwise, stampedes would have occurred, resulting in countless deaths and injuries. Xinjiang thief, the road is blocked by these killings. Come left and right. Lead me a horse, young master. I'll get off my horse and run away. A young master with a jade-like face was furious. He roughly stuffed the horse rope into the hands of the servants, got off the horse, tucked his robe into the jade belt, and walked away with his long legs, disappearing into the crowd in an instant. Zhang Yuqing was extremely intelligent and had extraordinary hearing. He had already heard the clamor and pressure at the foot of the mountain, fearing that thousands of people were coming up. He stood up, stepped on a flying sword, and roared up, suspended in the air. We are waiting here, he instructed LV Liang and others, casting their gaze down the mountain. Climbing high and looking far, I saw a bustling crowd, following the blue stone steps up the mountain path, one after another. He knew in his heart that this might be the effect of the immortal effect, and these people were rushing to pick up the immortal fate. Zhang Yu's mind cleared and a thought leapt out. Why not explore the attitude of people towards immortals in this direction and do some preliminary work for future development? Since he had this idea, he no longer hesitated and immediately transmitted his voice with magic, sending words to the ears of every person in the mountains and rivers. In one day, the world has been around for 1,000 years. The Great Road has long been obscure, and who can truly recognize the immortality? Everyone has a heart, and those who climb to the top first will receive a share of the immortal fate. The people were all in an uproar when they heard this. Why did the immortal speak up and promise to bestow immortality? The crowd who had come here with a lucky mentality suddenly surged with blood, rubbing their hands and fighting hard to take the lead. Get lost. A black-bearded man with bare arms fiercely overturned the young man blocking his way. The latter's strength was weak, and he rolled on the steps, almost falling off the cliff. Upon seeing this, Zhang Yuqing's eyes widened slightly, and a spell was unleashed. The big man suddenly felt his hands and feet out of control, and he rose lightly into the air, diving into the nearby stream. Having impure thoughts, committing evil deeds, and not having the heart to follow the Tao, we will impose slight punishment. Zhang Yuqing's voice once again penetrated everyone's ears, and suddenly, the faces of those who had originally intended to use force to eliminate others tightened. Especially for those who have seen the incident from a close distance, they are even more anxious, knowing that this immortal does not like people to exploit loopholes. The young man got up, kowtowed to Zhang Yuqing, and without saying a word, continued climbing the mountain. Upon seeing this, Zhang Yuqing also generously rewarded him, waving his hand and inputting a spell to him. The young man felt his hands and feet suddenly lighter, knowing that it was a fairy who made the move. He shouted loudly, "Thank you, Immortal Changxi." Everyone saw that his speed of climbing the mountain suddenly increased significantly, and their hearts were clear, secretly envious and jealous. This kid is really lucky, he just got pushed by someone and became Jian Zai Xian Xian. If it were himself, he would be willing to fall and break his head and bleed blood. However, it seems that this immortal is quite reasonable. Such a pure-hearted immortal, I don't know what that immortal fate really is. Is it difficult to achieve? Can one live forever? Zhang Yuqing naturally couldn't help them grow into immortals, and his purpose in taking action was not because he couldn't stand the evil deeds of the great men, but because maintaining necessary order was beneficial to him. Although deliberately setting obstacles for these seekers of immortality does not mean allowing them to compete with each other without boundaries or rules. You should know that Zhang Yuqing's cultivation level is not high nowadays, it's just that the fourth layer of qi refining can barely release 30 zhang of mana, and he can't even subdue or protect everyone in a moment. Only by clearly stating to them to stop some extreme behavior can we stop the occurrence of such a malignant event. Otherwise, once the situation escalates and bloodshed or even casualties occur, it will inevitably lower the status of this immortal in the hearts of everyone. At the same time, his mind quickly swept over the faces of the mountaineers, discerning them as the immortal beings he had predetermined. The saying goes that every competition has its insider information. Zhang Yuqing put in effort to perform this play, but of course, she didn't really want to help these immortal mortals overcome the sea of suffering. He just wants those who he has chosen to build his influence for to feel that he is a fairyland that has been sought after through hardships. This doesn't work. He's old and frail, at most he's a wealthy man. This one is decent, it seems to have come from a privileged background, perhaps still fully read poetry and books, and devoted to the Tao. Although this person is old and still needs to be carried by someone to climb the mountain, wearing jade and gold should be a court official and included in the preliminary election. Sword light shuttled back and forth, selecting about 20.30 out of over 1,000 people. Zhang Yuqing pressed the sword light and sat upright in the sky. At this moment, the only passage to the mountaintop is blocked below his suspended position, and anyone who wants to reach the mountaintop must pass through this mountain road, which is about 100 meters long. As Zhang Yuqing was selecting candidates, everyone from top to bottom saw the sword light in the sky, and his desire for immortality became even more determined. At the same time, many people with unclean hands and feet were screened out, and Zhang Yuqing mercilessly picked them up with mental strength and threw them into the stream. The immortal's grace and the means of distinguishing good and evil have also been imprinted in everyone's mind, and everyone is becoming more and more respectful. Soon, the first group of people who went up the mountain arrived at Zhang Yuqing. However, as they stepped up the stairs with their feet, they instantly fell into a stiff state, their eyes blurred, as if losing consciousness. Zhang Yuqing sighed inwardly. Although you are fast, you have no fate with me, and can only let you indulge in illusions for a while. He had already released his divine thoughts, enveloping all the surrounding areas within 30 zhang. Anyone who did not enter his eyes would be lost in illusions. The move, mysterious god technique, taught me by my friend Gu Hun is quite useful. Although it cannot be applied to cultivators, it is not satisfactory to use it on ordinary people. It is said that this is a spell created by a scattered cultivator who cannot survive in the cultivation world. He relied on this spell to confuse several nobles in the mortal world, living a life of drunkenness and dreaming. Then one day, the wandering demon cultivator dissected his heart and liver, and refined his soul. Not long after, a fair-skinned young man wearing a silk robe arrived at the mountaintop. He looked up under the scorching sunlight and stared at the immortal figure on the flying sword with bright eyes, his heart filled with infinite longing. Although Yang Huayu is young, she has great ambitions in her heart. He didn't want to fight on the battlefield for his family and country like his parents did for a lifetime, and in the end, he was ridiculed by people for being a good man who couldn't sing as well as a good man outside Donghua Gate. However, as a military general from a family background, he did not plan to take the imperial examination and become an official. He only had a special interest in the affairs of gods, and monsters since childhood, and was determined to cultivate immortality and become a Taoist. The saying goes that ordinary people have limits, and only by not being human can they fiercely attack the faces of those civil servants. Unfortunately, he has donated thousands of guan in various temples and Taoist temples, and has not yet learned any of the methods of cultivating and becoming a Buddha. He was so angry that he made up his mind to slaughter the Buddha and destroy the Tao. He hated someone mentioning the difference between immortals and Buddhas in his life. Even the best gangsters dared not invite him to go to the temple to offer incense together. Until today, when the dazzling immortal figure, like a rainbow shining through the sun, inexplicably fiercely charged into his heart, Yang Huayu knew. There's no relief, it's just deceiving oneself. Turns out, there are really immortals in this world. So without hesitation, he stole his grandmother Mu Guiying's favorite yellow husky horse and headed straight towards the mountains and streams. Now, the immortal he had been chasing for 10 years stands tall in the sky above. Yang Huayu looked at the countless drowsy crowds ahead and took that step without hesitation, as if they were nothing. In an instant, the light in front of me shone brightly. Countless scenes came one after another, and he seemed to have been taken in by immortals as a child under his seat, breathing in refined energy, using mountains as furnaces, refining the great sun, achieving golden pills, swallowing them into his stomach, and transcending the world. After a moment, he woke up feeling lost and looked around at the ordinary people who were still drowsy and trapped in illusions. He smiled self-deprecatingly and continued to climb upwards with firm eyes. Zhang Yuqing also chuckled inwardly when she saw Yang Huayu cooperating so well. Just a slight strategy, deliberately interrupting the effects of some people's mystical spells, makes him firmly believe that he is a person with immortal fate. This plan is very clever. After a while, the first group of people who fell into the illusion had reached their limit in their magical effects and also woke up one after another. You are not determined and have no connection with the immortal path. Let's go back. Zhang Yuqing's voice once again echoed in everyone's ears. There is no way, if they are not allowed to leave, this short area of over 100 meters will be completely blocked, and the people behind will not be able to squeeze in at all. The crowd only sighed and dared not argue with the immortals, but returned with a deep sigh. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Self-Generation of Magic. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Self-Generation of Magic. Batch after batch of people took turns coming forward in order. The eliminated people were also unwilling to leave and reluctantly gathered by the stone steps halfway up the mountain, admiring the lucky one who had successfully passed the formation on the other side of the mountain road. After multiple rounds of selection, almost everyone knows that once they step into a certain range, they will be lost in an illusion full of beautiful dreams. In the illusion, they possess the things they crave the most on a daily basis, devouring all the banquets of the world with a desire for food and drink, indulging in beauty and becoming the most prestigious figures with a desire for power, and so on. The only commonality is that they all fail to control themselves, ultimately being consumed by hallucinations. The desire gap is difficult to fill, and when they wake up exhausted, they only feel a big dream. Therefore, they also refer to this as the cultivation path set by true immortals, specifically testing whether people can grasp their own devout heart towards the Tao. For those who have gone through the path of refining their hearts, everyone also cast admiring eyes in envy. Only those who can maintain their true selves in the face of the most coveted things at their fingertips may be qualified to deserve the word immortal fate. At this time, only 7 or 8 people were left after crossing the narrow mountain road. Among them were young gentlemen, middle-aged wealthy merchants, decadent old men, and even middle-aged beautiful women feeling the eager gaze cast by the eliminated ones at the foot of the mountain. Everyone was still somewhat incredulous, panting and muttering to themselves, I actually passed. Recalling the contents of the illusion, several people felt as if they were separated from each other, and even I didn't know how I managed to break through the illusion formation. Just like a moment of confusion, suddenly feeling unreal, and then waking up, I have a fate with immortals, it is fate. Among them, an old man stood on crutches. Although he only stood calmly, he was inexplicably majestic, making it difficult to approach. He was the one who needed his servants to carry the mountain climbing. Now, the robust servant still stands still in the process of refining his mind with a smile on his face, while he just shakes his mind and regains consciousness. He takes his cane and climbs the mountain alone. 8 Wise Kings. Yang Huaiyu looked at the old man dumbfounded and quickly stepped forward, carefully supporting him. Why did your old man come too? The 8 sages king stroked his beard with a smile and said, Why, if you, the younger generation of the Yang family, can come, then I can't come to seek immortality. Besides, isn't this now proving that I am also a person with a fairy-like fate? Yang Huaiyu blushed and said, Why bother working so hard in this ancient and rare age? If you don't wait quietly at home for the officials to summon you, the immortals won't run away. The 8 sages king put away his smile, his expression serious, and his voice slightly bitter and reminiscent. You don't understand, the immortal fate, if you don't argue, then there is no fate. Yang Huaiyu scratched her ear and realized that she didn't understand. In his opinion, if the officials knew that the true immortal had descended into the world, they would definitely send people to quickly summon him. But by then, he will definitely have nothing to do with him. A group of elderly people in the court will surely compete to surround the immortal. He is a young son of the Yang mansion, so don't even try to squeeze in. What kind of immortal fate is there? It must be given priority to those of his father's generation. However, he believed that with the position that even the officials had to carefully offer, and in terms of age and seniority, there seemed to be no need to personally go through this situation. Strange. Zhang Yuqing casually let go of the young man who had been bullied by the strong man earlier, and muttered to himself, Why is this magical power used endlessly today, without any signs of weakness for so long? According to his level of refining qi in the 4th layer, he had to control the flying sword and use his mystical magic to screen the crowd. Although he was not exhausted at this moment, he always felt a slight emptiness in the elixir field. However, at this moment, his dantian was filled with mana, and his meridians were running smoothly. Not only did he not feel tired at all, but he was also full of energy, and even felt a sense of increasing mana. If something goes wrong, there will always be demons. Zhang Yuqing withdrew most of his divine consciousness, looked inside his own dantian, and indeed realized that he looked like he had abundant spiritual light and magical power, unlike continuously using his mesmerizing magic and controlling qi for half an hour. As for the lifeline of the practitioner dantian magic, since Zhang Yuqing has discovered something suspicious, he naturally needs to thoroughly investigate the origin, otherwise even good things will always cause worry and concern. Does magic naturally generate? Upon a closer inspection, he easily noticed something amiss. It is a long process to accumulate mana like his miscellaneous spiritual roots. Starting from extracting spiritual energy, one must refine impurities bit by bit in order to accumulate a trace of pure magic. And now, deep in his elixir field, a constant stream of pure and refined magic has naturally evolved, as if it were made in heaven, no different from the magic he has distilled himself. This characteristic is quite similar to the heavenly spirit root mentioned in the book. Zhang Yuqing was stunned and couldn't help but think of the spiritual energy that helped him break through the middle stage of qi refining. Suddenly, he was full of excitement and his gaze was cast down. Where he caught his eye, thousands of people cast their pleading and longing gaze at him. This idea is so vast that it has almost turned into substance. The increasing abundance of magical power seems to have started before I became a saint. If that's the case, perhaps it's related to everyone's desire. As recorded in ancient books, ancient gods had faith as their source of power. However, with the 4th major calamity in the cultivation world, the Shintoism was completely shattered, and all the deities who absorbed their faith died and their inheritance was broken. No one has ever heard of anyone who can collect the power of wishes for their own use. So, my golden fingers still have such wonderful uses. Zhang Yuqing cleared his mind, looking forward to how his cultivation will soar after establishing a complete force. It's just the wish power of thousands of people that can allow him to enjoy the effect of the heavenly spirit root magic self-generation. Bianliang City has millions of people. If bewitching has won over these million people, breaking through and building foundations is just around the corner, right? It's time to give some genuine products. Zhang Yuqing murmured. At this moment, his gaze at these thousands of people was completely different from what he had just seen. Originally, they were only treated as audience, as background, but it turned out that they still had the potential to be seeds. As long as we use some immortal family means to make them our devout believers, the millions of followers in Bianliang City may not be a problem. On the other hand, the initial candidates for the faction have also been selected, and Zhang Yuqing intentionally accelerated the speed of crowd rotation. Not long after, more than 3,000 people in the entire stream and mountain experienced the heart-refining path, and deeply enjoyed the effect of being confused by the enchanting technique. Everyone has firmly believed in Zhang Yuqing's identity as an exiled immortal, and the time has come. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Changsheng Emperor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Changsheng Emperor. On the mountaintop, the 5 disciples of Master Bianliang were extremely anxious. From time to time, screams of surprise echoed in their ears, and how could they not know that there might be many immortal hunters coming to this small stream and mountain at this moment? It's broken, there are competitors, and immortals don't belong to themselves anymore. Liang was filled with doubts in his heart, fearing that someone would snatch away his immortal fate. He was so anxious that he scratched his ears and cheeks. Even though those people were within reach, there was a decree prohibiting them from leaving this place easily, and Liang dared not disobey the immortal's will. He can only persuade himself to force himself to calm down, and the immortals have their own arrangements. During this period, one can occasionally hear various decrees issued by the immortal. They also became aware of the promise made by the immortal to give the person who ascended to the summit a divine fate, and also knew that someone had committed evil and had been disqualified in advance. When it comes to the first person to reach the summit, it is clear that I am the old Taoist. Liang's heart was filled with slander, and he dared not bring it to his mouth. The immortal family is mysterious. What if you can hear it from such a distance? He had to pretend to be in a dusty posture, with a devout face, sit cross-legged, meditate like Zhang Yuqing did before, and instructed the 4 disciples to sit down one by one. It's also strange, how come no one has climbed the mountain after so long? Liang naturally didn't know that anyone who had crossed the heart-refining formation would hear Zhang Yuqing's instructions in their ears. You have a divine fate, so you don't need to travel anymore, just wait for a moment. Just a few dozen steps away, about 10 people selected by Zhang Yuanqing waited quietly. And dozens of steps below their steps, there are thousands of people who have not been able to break through the path of refining their hearts. This is a mere 20.30 steps, which is the difference between immortals and mortals. The 8 sages' king's eyes became increasingly serious and obscure, silently gazing at the envious people below the mountain, unsure of what they were thinking. Yang Huayu and 2 other men from privileged backgrounds gathered behind him. Not far away, several wealthy merchants gathered together, and a beautiful woman supported a middle-aged woman. Although they are both people with a fairy-like fate, they still stick to their own social classes and backgrounds, and dare not easily violate them. The young man who had been bullied by the strong man was obviously just a farmer, with a young and inexperienced face. Fortunately, stepping onto the mountaintop steps was almost like winning a million congratulations to him. At this moment, he was still a bit dizzy, crouching on one side with his neck down. The rest of the people are not the same. In addition to the obvious wealthy businessmen, there are also a few talented individuals with a strong academic atmosphere, a salesperson carrying a basket, and even a man with a cross-legged face and fierce eyes. Fate and law have all arrived. Let's talk about the gods and immortals. Everyone, follow me up the mountain. The clear and penetrating voice of the immortal permeated the entire stream and mountain, and the green rainbow sword light flashed away, casting itself towards the mountaintop. The last group of people who were addicted to hallucinations opened their eyes in confusion, looking at the fairy's departing figure with a sense of loss. Without a doubt, they failed. Behind them, there were over 3,000 people who were both failures and those who had no divine fate. The dozen or so people who had broken through the heart-refining formation at the foot of the mountaintop were overjoyed when they heard this, and turned around and walked towards the mountaintop in twos and threes. The Immortals' teachings are hard for us to listen to, it's really unwillingness. Someone's eyes showed a strong sense of sadness, anger, and regret, wishing to experience another illusion, firmly believing that they would be able to hold on to their true intentions this time. Well, it seems that the Immortals haven't stopped us, so we're not allowed to listen, right? Someone took over. As soon as this sentence was spoken, someone tentatively took a step towards the mountaintop. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Subsequently, he decided to take 3 steps and 1 step at a time, and quickly rushed to the place where the 8 wise kings and others had just been staying. Hey, it's okay, you can come up. The person had a cheerful expression on their face and swiftly lifted their feet upwards. Wow! Seeing this scene, everyone who had originally planned to return disappointed turned around and exchanged glances. Since the Immortals did not stop us, it means we are allowed to witness from the side. In the past, when my Buddha preached, he spared no effort to listen to snakes, insects, mice, and ants. Anyone with wisdom can come and listen to the scriptures. This person, disregarding the distinction between Buddhism and Taoism, turned around and went up the mountain. Everyone regained their interest, neither seeking immortality nor being calm. However, there are not many opportunities to catch up with the true Immortals' teachings. Currently, everyone plans to go to the mountaintop to observe. Yang Huayu and others slowly climbed to the mountaintop with their swords tightly clustered, and were all surprised. But on the empty meadow, there were a large, 4, and a few Taoist monks meditating. Immortals sit upright in the sky, as if unaware. Where did those 4 people come from, and why did they reach the summit 1 step ahead of us? The 8 wise kings raised their hands and pointed. It looks like a Taoist priest from Shishan Taoist temple. A few years ago, I invited them to my home to open an altar and cook. A pot-bellied merchant suspected the leader should be Taoist Qing Feng, but I don't remember him. Not so. He racked his brains and finally remembered the vocabulary. Yes, immortal spirit and bone. It's just immortal spirit and bone. Upon hearing this, everyone looked around, only to see the old Taoist's robes rustling in the wind, with no sadness or joy on his face, reciting the Taoist scriptures lightly. Although his beard and hair are all white, they are crystal clear, like jade, with a rosy complexion like a baby. He is truly like an extraordinary expert. If Master Qing Feng had looked like this before, even if he had broken my leg, I wouldn't have dared to give him only half of the Dharma money, the merchant whispered. The concept of Changsheng is derived from my Taoist field, and after a long period of time, it has all disappeared, leaving only this legacy. Zhang Yuqing casually explained the reason, but heard a huge shock in Liang's heart below. I see. Yes, everything is right. No wonder the old immortal came straight to Shishan as soon as he entered the world. It turns out that our ancestors really inherited the tradition of immortality. It's just that perhaps the classics were lost during the chaos of war, and we didn't distinguish between true immortals. We even forgot that we were the true immortal Taoist master. Even with Liang's endurance at this moment, his face turned red, giving off a fleeting feeling of being knocked unconscious by immortal fate. No wonder the immortal does not allow us to compete for the mountain-climbing immortal fate. What is more important than the immortal fate of the inheritor of the Taoist tradition? Liang straightened his spine, feeling a gloomy aura that had accumulated for over 40 years slowly emerging. Refreshing and refreshing, can only be said to be refreshing and refreshing. The 4 Taoist children are also from the same family as Yu Rongyan. It turns out that our family is from the same family as Changsheng. True immortal Dao Tong. The remaining 10 or so people looked at each other and bowed in unison, saying, "Have you seen the eternal emperor?" The concept of immortality is that the immortal is naturally the great emperor of eternal life. During the Northern Song Dynasty, there was a preference for deities such as Donghua Emperor, Antarctic Emperor, Zhenwu Emperor, and so on. As soon as we stroked the roots of the halal immortal, we heard a crowd rushing up from the foot of the mountain. Thousands of people are curious about what this immortal fate really is. If it were fate to meet, this life would also be worth it. Can they also come up? Yang Huayu stared, feeling surrounded by the crowd. Those who have the heart of the Tao, although there is no immortal fate, they also have their own destiny, it doesn't matter. Zhang Yuqing's voice echoed through the mountaintop of the creek, and everyone immediately felt at ease. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Missionaries. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Missionaries. There are many illnesses in the world, and all living beings are suffering. Today, since you have met me once, you can receive a blessing. Zhang Yuqing's voice became even more sacred. Although her voice was not loud, it accurately penetrated into the ears of everyone present. He lightly waved his robe sleeves, and the faint blue light swirled straight into the sky, transforming into a spiritual cloud that enveloped the entire stream and mountain. Calling for wind and rain. The crowd on the creek and mountain exclaimed in amazement, seeing the sun covered by rain clouds summoned by the immortal. Everyone was amazed, and at the same time, a strong sense of curiosity arose. They didn't know what the immortal meant by the protection. At this moment, Zhang Yuqing's cheeks turned slightly white, unknown to everyone. Although his body was constantly generating magic, the massive, little Gonlin technique almost emptied his elixir field. However, as everyone shouted and howled, the strong willpower quickly accumulated into a new magical power, and the discomfort on his face quickly covered up. The gentle breeze brushed past, and the spiritual clouds released pure raindrops, splashing down from the sky in an instant. This is. In the crowd, there was an old woman with a happy expression on her face. As soon as the spiritual rain that emitted a faint light touched her skin, it seemed to blend in, and her hair and skin were not even wet. A very comfortable feeling came from within. The old woman opened her mouth wide, lost in confusion due to excessive shock. She only felt a slight numbness in her face and fingertips caused by a stroke a few years ago. Just like withered trees in spring, some old illnesses and injuries have also weakened by half, and the hunched back and waist involuntarily straightened a lot. And the same sign is happening to 3,000 people on the creek and mountain at the same time. Everyone was surprised to find that bathed in the spiritual rain, they felt both comfortable and comfortable, as warm as soaking in a hot spring and unwilling to move. Elderly and physically frail individuals are particularly evident. After the spiritual rain, their spirits have improved significantly, and their pain reactions have been suppressed to the limit, restoring their health. Young people and young children feel that their physical strength has improved significantly, and the leg soreness caused by hiking has disappeared without a trace. The 8 wise kings threw away their crutches, knelt down on the ground, and thanked, "Emperor Xie Changsheng has mercy on us, the elderly and the weak." Upon hearing this, everyone knelt down one after another, chanting, "The great compassion of the Changsheng Emperor," and sincerely and devoutly dedicating their faith. For the general public, immortals are nothing special. If they cannot transform people into immortals, then they are no different from the emperor who is high and mighty. However, when encountering such a deity who is willing to release goodwill to the lower class, the people will not hesitate to throw themselves into his embrace, worship them day by day, and pray for blessings. Their original curiosity, fear, and other emotions towards immortals instantly transformed into cravings. After all, in life, there are inevitably 3 disasters and 2 illnesses. Especially during the Song Dynasty, even the highly esteemed emperor did not receive the best treatment when he fell ill, and the outdated medical system left most people in a state of long-term illness and pain. In the past, these people only sought spiritual solace by praying to gods and worshipping Buddha, seeing it as some comfort in their numb lives. And now, as they personally bathed in the fairy rain, they realized that seeking immortality can really improve their illness and pain. Even if he is not someone with a divine fate, the Changsheng emperor would not hesitate to reward him with this immortal rain. If this is not the highest degree of immortality, then what are the golden statues in temples that never appear or care about their own lives? The crowd cried and shouted in unison, thanking Emperor Changsheng for his blessings and hoping that he would provide them with better protection. Let's call it a day and let the sentient beings disperse. Faced with this chaotic sign, Zhang Yuqing showed no mercy, waving his robe sleeve and closing his eyes without saying a word. Seeing that the Changsheng emperor did not respond, even the women, children, and elderly who were kneeling and crying the most pitifully in the crowd could not attract his attention. Everyone suddenly realized that doing so could not bind immortals for blessings. Everyone, listen to me. LV Dao Chang cleared his throat and stood up straight. As he spoke, he tentatively glanced at Zhang Yuqing. Seeing that his true immortal had no sorrow or joy, he did not stop him. His courage also increased a bit, and he said loudly, "The Changsheng immortal emperor is the only true immortal in the world. He descended from the Dharma body due to his compassion for the people and saved the world. It is fortunate that everyone gathered at this immortal mountain today, and it will be recorded in history in the future. However, ordinary people should not lightly disturb the true immortals. Now that you have received blessings, it is a pity for the immortals. What are you still crying and crying for? If you evil the immortals, it may not be a good thing. I, LV Liang, am the 129th generation true descendant of the Changsheng temple. I am now honored as the head of the Changsheng temple. I have been worshipping the Changsheng immortal emperor in my temple for 1,000 years. If you have the intention, you can also worship the immortal emperor's golden body at home in the future. Now that Emperor Changsheng has descended to the mortal world, the mountains and rivers have turned into immortal mountains, serving as a dojo for his elderly and family members. It will not hinder the worshippers' worship and kneeling. Our Changsheng temple will continue to open the door for the people of the world to worship the true immortals. You only need to serve devoutly, and you will be able to pray for the protection of immortals." The more LV Liang spoke, the more fluent he became, and he also nodded repeatedly. For the true gods and immortals, the best reward that the people can give them is the offering of incense and fire. The old Taoist who has been a monk for decades also knows this. After all, he has read many Taoist scriptures and Buddhist scriptures in these years, and has the instinct of being a clergyman. Offering sacrifices for one's own immortals is a fundamental skill. The fact that Emperor Changsheng did not stop him indicates that he recognized his act of taking advantage of the opportunity to preach. LV Liang's heart was burning with enthusiasm, and he became even more enthusiastic. I was originally worried about my usefulness to the immortal, but I didn't expect to find my true self positioning so quickly now. I immediately felt a sense of joy in my heart. Now that you have received one blessing, please return to your mansion first and pray devoutly to Emperor Changsheng. Do not stay here anymore to disturb the rest of the immortals. Please note that the grace of the immortals is like the sea, and the power of the immortals is like the mountain. Don't mistake yourself. In the last sentence, LV Liang's eyes were wide and angry, exuding an extraordinary aura. He had acquired a trace of Zhang Yuqing's spiritual power, which had a deterrent effect on ordinary people. At this moment, he unconsciously used it, immediately causing several people who were close to him to fall to the ground in fear. We dare not. We dare not. The frightened crowd knelt down and kowtowed to Zhang Yuqing, who was suspended in the air. They couldn't see Zhang Yuqing's face clearly in the sky, and could only vaguely feel the gaze of this true immortal casting on themselves and others. The concept of longevity helps the world, so there is no need to worry. Zhang Yuqing used her magical power to lift several people and ease their worries. She dragged them up and placed them on the steps down the mountain. If you have the heart of the Tao, just pray to me devoutly. If your heart is sincere, I will know and go. Emperor Xie Changsheng. Upon hearing this, everyone sincerely bowed with their hands clasped together. Liang slapped his face and deliberately scolded them for using Buddhist rituals to worship the immortals of our Taoism. However, when he saw that his true immortals had no reaction, he followed them. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Body Refining Method Decision. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Body Refining Method Decision. Everyone once again bowed 3 times and kowtowed 9 times to Zhang Yuqing, and then left the mountain. Along the way, they were still excited and discussed with each other the origins of the Changsheng Emperor, to see how they could once again win the favor of the immortal. Some say they are innate immortals, while others say they are immortals who were achieved through the enlightenment of their predecessors. However, due to the low frequency of the name Changsheng appearing in past storybooks, it is also unclear who is more powerful than the Zhenwu Emperor in this Changsheng Emperor. Some people say that all immortals are under the jurisdiction of the Haotian god, while others believe that the Changsheng Emperor is the only true immortal in the world, and all other immortals and Buddhas are under his jurisdiction. We have been deceived by false immortals and Buddhas who have been deceiving the world and stealing names for too long, and we don't even know that there is a real immortal like the Changsheng Emperor in this world. Even the important Taoist temple of Changsheng Temple hasn't burned a few incense sticks. I am truly ashamed. Someone suggested that it's better to go to the Changsheng Temple and kowtow a few heads before going down the mountain. Anyway, it's just a few more steps around the mountain. Once this proposal was put forward, it immediately received everyone's response. Even those who had already reached the foot of the mountain heard that they were going to visit the Changsheng Temple together, so they turned around and went up the mountain again. They were only annoyed that those who knew that the Changsheng Temple was located on the mountain did not speak up earlier, causing them to circle around for nothing. This palace is so simple. At first, a few people walked quickly and followed the people near Xishan to Changsheng Temple. They were surprised to see that the buildings were low and dilapidated, and the temple eaves were in disrepair for a long time. I am willing to donate 50 guan to rebuild the temple. At that moment, a middle-aged scholar closed his fan and drank. I don't know where the temple blessings are in the temple. Follow me home to get the money. I can't wait for a moment. How can I let the upper immortal residents break the temple? It is truly a disgrace to the immortals, and my heart is very painful. I am willing to donate 20 guan. Others heard it and quickly followed suit. I only have 1 arm of strength and am willing to help for free. Everyone was full of gossip, and together with the people who came from behind, they gathered about 3,000 to 4,000 guan of cash. 40 to 50 strong men worked, and the rest of the donations were not counted. If Taoist Bianliang had known about this in the past, he might have been so happy that he didn't even mention his pants, so he would have honored these people as guests. Now, in the view of longevity, there is silence and no movement. All the living people are listening to the teachings of the immortal on the mountaintop. Who knew there were so many enthusiastic pilgrims blocking here? Immortal immortality, I wonder if you call me this. Is there a decree to grant it? At the top of the creek, everyone waited for a long time, their eyes wide open and their eyes wide open. After a full 10 minutes, someone finally couldn't help but ask. Fool. This idea flashed through the minds of many people present, especially the 8 sages king who sighed faintly. Lack of mental state, lack of etiquette, even if there is a fairy fate, it is difficult to break the dust fate. Zhang Yuqing finally spoke. He picked up the merchant who was speaking from dozens of feet away and threw him down the mountain steps. All right, let's have a little spiritual energy with you and go. The merchant's face was extremely shocked, showing a strong expression of regret and unwillingness. He was about to struggle, but he heard a cold sigh and then fell into a coma. The crowd only saw a slight flicker of spiritual light in the middle-aged man's eyebrows, his eyes turning white, and he rolled down the mountain, causing a chill in his heart. With a ray of spiritual energy bestowed upon me to protect my body, there is no risk of life or death, and I am just a wealthy man in the world. As Zhang Yuqing spoke again, they all breathed a sigh of relief. It turns out that's the case. I thought losing etiquette would lead to being pinched to death by the immortal. As Zhang Yuqing looked at the group of people with a more upright attitude, she nodded. Although these people have emerged through a 1-in-1,000-mile competition, they are not worried about their unstable heart towards the Tao, but they are inevitably arrogant and difficult to tame. It is necessary to dismiss a few and arouse their fear in their hearts. Zhang Yuqing is well aware that as a deity, the unpredictable power of grace can better control one's heart. Faced with the masses outside, all you need to do is simply show kindness and leave all the evil deeds to those below. For example, when Bianliang just spoke up to drive people away, he greatly appreciated his intentions. In the future, those people will only remember that it was his Changsheng emperor who sprinkled spiritual rain, and Lu Daochang was the one who drove them down the mountain. But for the basic backbone of his power formation in front of them, it is necessary to let them know that when dealing with the immortal, they should be both intimidated and virtuous, and always pay attention to their words and actions to avoid giving birth to other thoughts in the future. Immortal power is unpredictable. The 4 words were firmly imprinted in the heart and mind of the 8 wise kings, and he became even more humble and respectful, afraid to show any dissatisfaction. You and others are all immortal, so you can enter our door. Zhang Yuqing slowly spoke up and finally clarified what the so-called immortal fate was. Everyone's heart skipped a beat, it was all ecstasy. Sure enough, sure enough. The 8 wise kings only felt his chest bulging back and forth like a blower. If he hadn't just bathed in the immortal rain, this strong stimulation would probably have caused him to faint. Although there are speculations, now that the Changsheng emperor personally promised them the opportunity to embark on the path of cultivating immortals, how could it not be uplifting? Everyone's reaction was captured in Zhang Yuqing's eyes, and he remained calm in his heart. He thought to himself, don't think about it, it's impossible for me to really teach you the little qi refining technique. In fact, Zhang Yuqing is well aware that he is just a cultivator of the 4 layers of qi refining. Nowadays, the things he can do are extremely limited, and he must rely on the current rudimentary means to make everyone in the world believe that he is an invincible true immortal. Therefore, it is necessary not to cultivate another cultivator in this world to expose oneself. However, the Dharma decisions used by ordinary people in the Eastern Wilderness immortal cultivation realm to strengthen their physical fitness can be issued. After all, these people are the team he has gathered for the future formation of his power network. In order to develop his power and better make people believe that the belief in the eternal life emperor can lead to immortality, it is necessary to help these people obtain a basic appearance of the immortal family. There are demon beasts and birds in the Eastern Wilderness world. Although ordinary people are blessed by cultivators, they often suffer heavy casualties. There are cultivators who sympathize with the heavens and feel that ordinary people are limited by their spiritual roots and unable to fight against monsters. They have specially created the body refining technique. This method does not require spiritual roots, but emphasizes polishing the skin, flesh, and bone membrane to strengthen oneself. If practiced deep, one can barely withstand a flying sword without dying. About dozens of people together can barely deal with a cultivator with a level of qi refining. But when encountering a mid-stage of qi refining like Zhang Yuqing, who can fly with a sword, there are as many deaths as possible. There's nothing else, just because someone can fly, you can only catch them blind. Moreover, in the middle stage of qi refining, you can also unleash 30 zhang of mana and manipulate some sharp weapons to poke at you at will. Even if your body is fully refined, it will turn into rotten flesh. However, this body refining technique is extremely suitable for Zhang Yuqing's current needs. Because this body training method not only strengthens the body, but also takes into account the function of health preservation. If it progresses to a delicate point, enough to turn white hair into black, breaking through the limit of lifespan, it can live for 120 years. You should know that even the founder of the foundation can only live for more than 200 years. A simple exercise technique that everyone can practice can actually make people live for dozens of more years, which can be said to be magical. Therefore, this method is not only practiced by ordinary people in the Donghuang cultivation world, but also by almost every cultivator during the qi refining period. Zhang Yuqing is no exception. His cultivation skills have long been perfected, and cultivators have spiritual energy and magical power. Practicing this mortal martial art takes thousands of miles in a day, without any difficulty. It is not difficult to impart knowledge at this moment. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Origins of Disaster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Origins of Disaster. This method is called Changsheng Shangqing Yangyuan Gong, which is the foundation for achieving enlightenment. Zhang Yuqing sat cross-legged on the flying sword, with his right hand resting weakly. Using his mind, he took out a jade slip from his pocket and injected spiritual energy to activate it. The jade slip spun gracefully in the air, releasing a dazzling glow throughout the body. This is the natural effect of the jade slips activated by spiritual energy, which is quite frightening. The crowd looked at the jade slip on the fairy's palm, their eyes burning hot, and they wished they could take it right away. Of course, they all know that this is just a delusion, and besides, those who can stay are qualified to practice immortal methods, so there is no need to rush for this moment. Therefore, it is only a matter of bowing respectfully and waiting for the immortal to spread the Dharma. They naturally did not know that the jade slip stored in Zhang Yuqing's hand were the 12 methods of cultivating spiritual rice, rather than some body-refining techniques. Whereas mortal martial arts qualified to be stored in precious materials like jade slips. Even the cultivators in the eastern wilderness have not yet extravagantly used jade slips to record mortal martial arts. The normal martial arts techniques of ordinary people are recorded in online booklets, and cultivators throw them away after reading them. However, in the eyes of these people, Zhang Yuqing is considered a true immortal. Taking out a book to spread the Dharma would naturally be a bit out of place, so those who first pretended to be like him casually found a jade slip to prop up the facade. At this moment, you have not yet shed your ordinary body, your turbid energy has not been eliminated, and you cannot enter the realm of innate Tao body, nor can you read the immortal books. Zhang Yuqing found an excuse to put away the jade slip and said, "Let me give you an oral lecture and memorize it." Yes, the hard-working emperor of longevity. Yang Huayun others stood solemnly and followed Liang in a boxing salute, listening attentively. After orally reciting the content of refining the body, Zhang Yuqing suddenly let out a long sigh. Everyone was immersed in the mysterious Dharma decisions, feeling that they had never heard of any of the various methods. It was precisely at this moment of intense excitement that they were excited to harvest the immortal fate Dharma. At this moment, I suddenly heard that the immortal's emotions were not well understood. Zhao Yuanyan, the 8 sages' king, is old and frail, with a severe decline in his memory. He cannot remember the immortal teachings passed down by immortals and is pondering how to ask someone to copy a handwritten manuscript for himself. Seeing the immortal sigh, his mind turned and he asked with concern, "Why did the Changsheng emperor sigh? But what disrespect do we have?" Not really. After passing on the Dharma, Zhang Yuqing knew that the highlight was coming. To calm his emotions, he spoke in a calm tone. The world is full of ups and downs, and misfortunes are imminent. The year of the red sheep calamity is approaching, and I see you all like a vast expanse of white bones and wilderness. How can you not sigh? This. Everyone was shocked, both surprised and worried. The heavenly secrets are difficult to release, even true immortals fear the aura of calamity. Zhang Yuanqing's voice trembled with a hint of fear, and he sighed again. Well, the bestowal of the method of becoming immortals has already been imbued with cause and effect. You know, why has there never been a true immortal appearing in this world? We really don't know about this. Zhao Yuanyan bowed and kowtowed, answering. In the past, the ancestor of Hongjun opened up a vast expanse of the universe, divided into 8,864 realms, guarding the 9 heavens and dividing them into different realms. These realms were called Jinkong Little Heavens and were destined to suffer a disaster of 981 before they could return to the 9 heavens and ascend to the immortal realm again. Zhang Yuqing had a clear mind and told the story he had fabricated in a logical manner. You should know that since ancient times, seeking immortality and worshipping Buddha has always been to protect and avoid disasters. The significance of religious existence is to help ordinary people overcome calamity and avoid cleansing. Zhang Yuqing knew this well and also knew that if this true immortal wanted to promote his followers, he would have to first erect a disaster similar to the Great Flood. For thousands of years, without knowing the exact number of disasters, the red sheep returned to their rightful place, and the last disaster was finally within reach. The 9 heavenly immortals deduce the number of days and evolve into the future. Upon learning that this small world has not survived the calamity, it will eventually dissipate into nothingness and chaos, returning to the heavenly way. Therefore, all the gods and Buddhas in the sky have given up on promoting and educating this place, and have given up on others. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the room felt hair on their backs and sweat profusely. Upon hearing this suddenly, no one could have imagined that for thousands of years, there has never been a true deity appearing to be so terrifying. Their heavenly world has long been abandoned by the immortals, and is it a land beyond the world? If it weren't for the true immortal telling the truth, who would have known the truth? No one would suspect that this immortal who can fly to heaven and escape the earth, and casually set up the heart-refining formation, would fabricate stories to deceive them. I can't find a motive. The unequal information made everyone, including the 8 sages King Zhao Yuanyan, immediately believe the true immortal's words. However, I disagree. Zhang Yuqing's voice rang out calmly, even though it was just a few simple words, it sounded like 1,000 pounds in everyone's ears. I intruded into the slaying immortal formation without authorization, and secretly descended to this realm without telling the Taoist ancestor, because I came for the red sheep disaster. I see, true immortals cannot bear to see disasters and calamities descend into the world. They have just come to the mortal world to save all sentient beings. As recorded in ancient books, the number of days is unbeatable for ordinary people, and only by relying on true immortals can one overcome the great calamity. Zhang Yuqing's eyes widened slightly and her gaze cast downwards. There is a difference between immortals and mortals. I cannot personally erase this last calamity. If you want to return to the 9 heavens immortal realm and surrender to the red sheep, you still need to save yourself. Seeing the immortals' gaze cast towards them, everyone felt mentally excited and stood up. I, Su Er, and others praise my name, establish the eternal immortal sect, educate the people, promote the red sheep disaster, and let everyone in this world know that the great disaster is coming. By gathering the wishes of all sentient beings in this way, perhaps one can strive hard and break free from shackles. At that time, I will return to the 9 heavens, and those who are outstanding among you can accompany you left and right. Ascending immortality in one step or annihilating it all depends on your own destiny. Starting from today, rebuild the Taoist concept of longevity. There is a difference between immortals and mortals, and I cannot interfere with the operation of this realm. If I am contaminated with too much cause and effect, I may be sensed by the Taoist ancestor and expelled from this realm. Only those who possess immortal roots can speak more to you. Zhang Yuqing looked tired and waved her hand gently, secretly injecting a spiritual energy into everyone's body. You must remember that from now on, we must work together to fight against disasters, educate the people, and remember. This realm has been abandoned by the immortals, and the spiritual machine has become extinct. Only by relying on the wishes of all beings can one practice. I can help you build a foundation, and in the future, you will need to collect your own wishes. When you accumulate enough wishes and offer them to me, you can improve your path. The spirits of everyone were shaken, and they felt that there was an inexplicable piece of martial arts in their minds, which was just passed down by the Immortal as the eternal life upward cleansing and nourishing Yuan Gong. Subsequently, a much more comfortable warmth emerged from the dantian than the previous soaking in Lingyu, surging towards the limbs and bones. In the dark, even the most foolish person suddenly understood the full meaning of the first chapter of the cultivation method. More than 20 people groaned at the same time, breaking through the first level of the technique. As a fundamental health and wellness martial arts technique, Lian Ti Ju requires the consumption of cultivation resources. Ordinary people in the eastern wilderness are unable to sense spiritual energy, so they have to take monster meat sooner or later and use the huge energy contained in meat to refine their bodies. Only cultivators can directly infuse their bodies with spiritual energy to achieve better results. At this moment, Zhang Yuqing is helping everyone at the same time to use spiritual energy to top up and forcefully enter the martial arts. There is no way, the spiritual energy of the Northern Song Dynasty has dried up, and it is currently unknown whether there are any suitable spiritual objects to replace the flesh of monsters. If it were only to pass down the Dharma and let them go back to practice on their own, they might not be able to reach the beginner's level until they die. As the only cultivator, Zhang Yuqing only needs to hold the crucial resource of spiritual energy, and there is no need to be afraid of these people losing control. Having experienced the benefits of the rapid breakthrough of immortal spiritual energy infusion, there is no worry that they will not exert their subjective initiative to establish a religion based on the belief in Zhang Yuqing, the living true immortal. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Return to the Eastern Wilderness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Return to the Eastern Wilderness. Is this the way to become an immortal? Zhao Yuanyan tearfully felt his newly strengthened arms and chest. At the age of 60.9, he suffered from severe muscle loss, coupled with his reckless and unrestrained youth. Although he worked hard to maintain his health and replenish his vitality after middle age, he inevitably became a decaying old man with weakened limbs. I don't know when, my back can no longer stand straight, my eyes can no longer see small letters clearly, and I even have to rely on a cane when traveling. Although he is a prince, he can almost have people replace his body to do anything. His hands and feet were not flexible, and he could summon hundreds of young servants to become his new hands and feet with just one thought. However, no matter how clever the servant is, he cannot replace his desire for his own limbs to become stronger again. Now, after many years, he finally feels his withered muscles filling up again. That is another feeling different from dispelling pain. It's like aging being squeezed out of the body bit by bit, and the whole person is rejuvenated. Prince, you are much younger. Yang Huayu's feelings were not so obvious, only feeling that her limbs and arms were stronger and more powerful. Her relentless force was about to burst out, as if one punch could kill a cow. However, the changes in the 8 sage kings on the side startled him. A frail old man suddenly transformed, his back no longer hunched, his waist straightened, and even his hair and beard grew black roots. At this moment, where does Zhao Yuanyan look like an old man approaching 70? A middle-aged man in his 50s. Ah! Sister, you are so beautiful, exclaimed the young girl holding on to the beautiful woman not far away. Everyone remembers that the woman looked around 30 years old before, made of silk and satin, with excellent nourishment, but her face also had obvious signs of aging. At this moment, after breaking through a layer of physical refinement, which they believe is the first chapter of the eternal life upward cleansing and nourishing the Yuan Gong, the beautiful woman's skin has become smooth as jade again, and her crow's feet and raised head lines have all disappeared, just like a 20-year-old neighbor sister who is beautiful and moving. And that young girl also had skin as clean as snow, hair as dense as weave, lips as red, and a lot of loveliness between her eyebrows and eyes, becoming even more charming. Everyone generally feels that they are 4 or 5 years younger, and the older they age, the more obvious it is. Like Zhao Yuanyan, the 8 sages king, he is still around 20 years younger. This is because the beginner level of the body refining technique will restore a person to their most energetic state and maintain it. People in their 20s can maintain their 20s by practicing. The older a person becomes, the more they will transform towards their peak physical state as their skills improve. In addition to changes in appearance, they will also discover benefits such as being energetic, unforgettable, and full of vitality in the future. Emperor Xie Changsheng reopened this immortal realm. After everyone was excited, they knelt to the ground. Liang wasted half of his life, and at this moment, a sense of pride couldn't help but rise in his heart. He also had to be granted immortality, and at this moment, his already crystal-clear beard and hair completely turned white to black, becoming a Taoist in his early 40s. This is the true immortal I have believed in for most of my life. The only true immortal who has not betrayed us, is willing to go against the sky and descend the Dharma body to save all beings. Humph, the old bald donkeys of Daxiangguo temple worship pseudo-immortals and pseudo-Buddhas all day long. When things come to an end, who will care about their lives? My view of longevity has taken off. In this short film moment, he has already planned his future path. After all, the immortal had just said so much, and Liang naturally understood. Due to the cessation of spiritual power in this realm, although the Changsheng Emperor has reopened the immortal path, only by collecting the wishes of sentient beings can one practice. If you want to increase your cultivation in the future, you must find a way to spread the belief in the eternal Emperor. And when it comes to this path, who can have more experience than this observer who has worshipped the Changsheng Emperor for decades? He should take the lead in this groundbreaking event. At this moment, Liang was also dizzy. He had long forgotten that his Changsheng temple was not dedicated to the Changsheng Emperor, but was only named Changsheng Temple, barely embodying the word Changsheng. My name, Yuqing Taiyuan Changsheng Immortal Zun, you must remember it. Zhang Yuqing fabricated a fairy name to prevent these people from being confused about how to establish a palace and shape a golden body. We must remember, everyone present respectfully replied. Where is the immortal? Everyone was silently reciting the name of the immortal Lord when suddenly they heard a long drink coming from the steps below the mountain. I saw several people dressed like eunuchs, hastily carrying soldiers on their backs and climbing to the mountaintop. The envoy sent by the Imperial City Department to search for immortals has finally found Shishan. Zhang Yuqing looked at the group of visitors and suddenly understood in her heart. Changsheng, have I finally found your old man's house? The eunuchs wailed and rolled down the soldier's back with a few steps, kneeling on the ground and kowtowing incessantly. He had just sobbed a few times when suddenly a strange noise came from behind. The flying cavalry captain is in charge of affairs, and idle people should move away. Several well-armored soldiers pushed aside the eunuch, revealing one of them dressed as a civil servant. That civil servant is 30 years old, with a long beard and a fair complexion. As soon as he saw Zhang Yuqing, his face was filled with joy, and he bowed and said, Immortal, your majesty has been waiting for you for a long time. I can't deal with Chaotang for now. Zhang Yuqing's mind was running extremely fast, thinking that this was not the right time to get in touch with the court. With just one thought, the civil servant's upper and lower jaws were tightly clamped together, and he could no longer speak. The sudden change frightened the civil servants greatly, inexplicably, and their faces turned red. The soldiers and eunuchs around suddenly realized something was wrong, as if this immortal was not very welcoming to their arrival. Before they could take any action, everyone was instantly blocked by Zhang Yuqing, unable to move or open their mouths, and could only whimper softly. People often talk about immortals and want to soar to the blue sky with their wings inserted, but unfortunately, it's just a dream. Zhang Yuqing didn't even look at the envoys sent by the emperor and the civil service group, but turned his head and whispered. We are all immortal beings, not ordinary, and should not be mixed with the world and tainted with the turbid aura of the mortal world. The method of ascending to immortality has been taught to you. If you want to transcend this world and ascend to immortality, you need to make the world aware of the red sheep disaster in order to have a glimmer of hope. These words penetrated everyone's eardrums, echoing incessantly in their minds like Huang Zhong de Lv. I cannot dwell in the mortal world for long. I will stand outside the 9 heavens and block the red sheep to protect you. Finally, Zhang Yuqing glanced expressionlessly at the eunuch sent by the government. Tell the emperor that the time has not yet arrived, it is not when he seeks immortality and asks questions. After speaking, Zhang Yuqing showed no attachment and flew his sword into the sky. When the distance between him and the eunuchs, civil servants, and others exceeded 30 zhang, the shackles of the latter were naturally lifted, and one by one, the immortals looked up to heaven with fear on their faces. But in the middle of the sky, there was a golden light shining brightly, and the immortal turned into scattered golden dots, disappearing and disappearing. You wait. What kind of immortal fate have you obtained? Quickly return to the city with me and explain it in detail. As soon as the official of Naon got out of trouble, he saw that the true immortal knew he couldn't handle the task, so he left the disheartened inner eunuch behind and walked to the side of everyone, commanding them to drink from a high position. Oh! Even the old man wants to accompany your young master back to court for trial. Zhao Yuanyan watched coldly and suddenly spoke. Are you? Blind your dog's eyes, this is the 8 sages of the dynasty. Yang Huayu said angrily. He was angry that these people lacked etiquette and polluted the true immortals. The 8 wise kings. The civil servant was surprised and looked skeptical, saying, the 8 wise kings. Have you returned to your youth? We have all obtained the true immortal path. Zhao Yuanyan stroked his beard and smiled, now in front of you are 20.2 only descendants of the true immortal path in the world. Hong Xiaofu, you have already thought about it before speaking. This. Hong Xiaofu became entangled and his tough stance involuntarily weakened. Dong Huang, Hongdiwanfang City. Leaving the Hufeng cave, Zhang Yuqing slowly opened her eyes. Indeed, it has broken through, not just a dream. Feeling the cultivation of the 4 layers of qi refining, Zhang Yuqing's face showed a joyful expression, and then he pondered. Recalling the situation he hastily laid out, he felt that although some parts were slightly rough, when he first arrived at the Northern Song Dynasty, he had almost met his psychological expectations by simply starting to establish his influence. After all, before going, he was just a cultivator in the early stage of qi refining, with very few means to master. If he hadn't broken through to the middle stage and could fly with his sword, he probably wouldn't have dared to create such a grand situation. But now it is obviously not the time to contact the court. Although the ministers of the Northern Song Dynasty were just a group of ignorant ancient people, Zhang Yuqing still felt that they should not be underestimated. It's much harder to deceive them than to deceive the people of Hushi Mountain. In the middle stage of qi refining, one can try to practice more spells, and even enter the internal area of the square city for the first time. Speaking of which, Zhang Yuqing has been in Hongdiwanfang City for 2.5 years and has not yet been out of Liwofeng. After all, as a spiritual cultivator in the early stages of gas refining, he really didn't have any materials worth entering the market for trading. For many years, besides entrusting the steward of the Li family to help buy and sell some spiritual rice, he only occasionally purchased low-level materials used for cultivation. You only need to buy it at a few low-level monk trading locations outside the neighborhood. As for the area near the center of the spiritual meridian, at least a cultivation level in the middle stage of qi refining is required in order to fly with a sword and reach it. It is said that there are more spells, alchemy materials, and alchemy elixirs for sale there. Zhang Yuqing believes that at least several spells that can be learned in the middle stage of qi refining must be practiced in order to gradually connect with the court. At that time, he will be closer to the ordinary imagination of a fairy. As for now, we need to find a way to establish another identity on Donghuang's side. Otherwise, as a low-level spiritual planter with 4 spiritual roots, he would suddenly break through the middle stage of qi refining, which may attract unnecessary coveting. Moreover, it is better to use a different identity when purchasing spell secrets and elixirs. After all, Hongdiwanfang City is open to a large number of scattered cultivators, with a mix of good and bad, and is not safe. Having lived here for several years, Zhang Yuqing is very cautious. He will never let the Li family and others deceive him again. Come and ambush him. End of this chapter.